There is no such thing as stress. True or false? Everybody false? Well, it's interesting because no matter which way you'd answered, you could have said, you might be right. Depends on what you mean by there's no such thing as, because the reality is stress does not exist as a tangible thing. In other words, you can't box it up and ship it. You can't think to yourself, oh my word, this person is really aggravating me, so I'm going to go online and I'm going to buy some stress and I'm going to ship it to their house so I can stress them out. You can't box it up. You can't ship it from one place to another. You can't go online and buy it. You can't go online and sell it. Who would want to do that anyways? Go Amazon Prime. Love Amazon Prime, but who would want to get on there and, oh my word, Amazon Prime's got a special on stress. I think I'm going to buy some of that today. Would make no sense whatsoever. So it's not a tangible thing, but let me tell you something, you most definitely can feel its effects, can you not? And that's why we can say stress is a real thing. It's not a real tangible thing, but it is something that can be felt. Raise your hand if you've ever battled with stress in your life. I think all of us, we're all human, we've all got stressed out over things from one time to another. By definition, here's what stress is. It's a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. In other words, stress is an internal thing. Because it's internal, oftentimes it's self-produced. Now granted, there are many outside influences that can make one stress out a lot quicker and a lot easier when those outside circumstances are a part of your life, and we'll talk about some of those here in a few. I'd had someone tell me we were having a conversation, and we were talking about stress and being stressed out, and at the time I was very stressed out over a few different things in my life, and this individual had that ability just to kind of break the ice and just really bring stuff that seemed like it was a mountain back down to the molehill that it really was, and was a jokester. And I told him, I said how I was just absolutely stressed out. And looking for these just great words of advice as to what I can do to unstress, he said this, he said, do you know the surefire way to tell if someone is stressed? And I'm thinking, I don't care about how to tell if someone is stressed. I'm stressed right now. But do you know a surefire way to tell if someone is stressed? And he kind of half smiled, and I said, what? He said, well, you can tell how stressed they are by how many desserts they eat. And then silent. I was like, what in the world is that? Honestly, that's advice, that's counsel. What are you doing? He says, you can tell by how many desserts somebody eats. And I said, my simple reply was, what? And he began to ask about times that I was stressed. And I said, I'm stressed now. And he said, have you found yourself eating more desserts? And I'm thinking, yeah, actually I am. Yeah, that's true. But still, where are we getting on this thing? And I said, but I know there's a lot of people who, when they're stressed, they just don't even eat. And we went back and forth a little bit about this whole stressed or desserts. And I found that my mind was getting off of the stuff that I was stressed about, and I'm just talking about desserts, which I thought, well, that's kind of effective, so maybe that's what he's getting at on this thing. But I continue, no, it has nothing to do with desserts. Stressed and desserts have nothing to do with each other. And then finally he pulled out the big gun that would prove that stressed out people eat more desserts, so he wrote down the word stressed. And he handed me the piece of paper where he wrote down the word stressed, and he said, now read that backwards. And I was like, oh my goodness. Stressed spelled backwards is desserts. Wow, you are like brilliant. And it still meant nothing, but at the same time I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. But I was thinking about that this morning for this very reason. On Friday evening, we had a lot of stressed out men. Women's Appreciation Dinner was awesome. Men, thank you for putting that together. Women that were there, thank you for being there. Kevin, once again, kudos to you for all that you've done. But let me tell you something. We had some stressed out men. If desserts and stress go hand in hand, let me tell you, there were some men in the kitchen that were putting desserts away. And I don't mean putting them away in the fridge. I mean like we were putting them away. We got some gifted dessert makers in the Lord's house this morning. So now that I just wasted 5 of your minutes here this morning talking about desserts and stressed, I want you to do just this quick favor, and when I see the word stress, or I think about the word stressed, I spell it backwards, and it puts a smile on my face because I think, desserts! That's awesome. So that's the little Matt remedy. Let's go to the Word of God and look at the God remedy on how to handle stress and being stressed out. Jesus, at one time, he was surrounded by some stressed out individuals, and he shares these beautiful words in Matthew chapter 11. He says this, verses 28 through 30. Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens." Now, was he surrounded by people who were carrying weights on them, like physical, tangible weights? No, but he was surrounded by people who were carrying internal weights. They had stuff going on inside of them. They were stressed out. He says, "Come to me, all of you who are stressed, and I will give you," notice the word, everybody say it, rest. "Take my yoke upon you." Notice these words, "Let me teach you." Do you know every time you open up the Word of God, you should be allowing Jesus to teach you. You should be allowing God to teach you something. He's saying, if you got a lot of internal stuff going on, come to me and let me teach you. So oftentimes we get lulled into this trap by the adversary that simply all we have to do is we just have to come to him and just do nothing. And God, you just fix all of my problems. Jesus says, come to me and let me teach you. This morning I asked, are we ready to grow together? I could have asked this, are we ready to learn together? Are you ready to learn together? Jesus, teach us. He says, so let me teach you because I am humble and gentle at heart. And here's what will happen. You will find rest for your souls. Raise your hand if you would desire rest for your souls compared to stress for your souls. Verse number 30, for my yoke is easy to bear and the burden I give you is light. Or you could say that you won't strain under the load. You won't be stressed out if you come to him and allow him to teach you. I believe that the opposite of stress is rest. And by rest, I don't mean relaxing on a nice, comfy recliner and kicking your feet up in the air, turning on the TV and falling asleep. That's not what I'm talking about. That's physical rest. I'm talking about that inward rest. Now we're going to journey to an Old Testament psalm this morning. Psalm number 37. If you got your Bibles, feel free to turn there. If you don't have a Bible with you, there's a Bible somewhere in the seat in front of you. Grab one of those. If you're here without a Bible this morning, make that your own, or you can follow along on the screens. Psalm chapter 37, we're going to discover some insight on stress and rest, both this week and next week. And it's important to note, since Jesus points out in John chapter 5, verse 39, that all scriptures point to him, I truly believe that the truths that we'll find within the psalm are truths that Jesus desires to teach us. So we're coming to him for these next 2 weeks, and we're saying we'd like to exchange our stress for your rest. Those of you who might be finishing up on schooling and finals, and or you had a busy week at work like 2 or 3 weeks ago that you were stressed out about, Kevin with the women's event, now that that's behind us, all of you might be thinking to yourself, wow, Matt, this would have been something great to have talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago when I was stressing out over this, that, and the other. And to that I simply say, sorry. But we're talking about it today. Stress. First thing that we want to see on our outline this morning is the problem. Psalm 37 is going to talk about some problems, beginning in verse number 1. And it's also important to note that in Psalm 37, this is written by old man David. This isn't written by young David. This is written by old man David, who has lived some real life experiences. He's had his highs, he's had his lows. He's had his time of rest, and he's had his time of stress. And here he is writing this psalm, and he says this, don't worry. Worry's an inward thing. A lot of times worry can just lead to stress. So you could say just don't stress. Don't worry about the wicked. Who are the wicked? The wicked are those who aren't in a relationship with God. Don't worry about the wicked or envy those who do wrong. For like grass, they soon fade away. Like spring flowers, they soon wither. Trust in the Lord and do good. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desire. Commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust him, and he will help you. He will make your innocence radiate like the dawn, and the justice of your cause will shine like the noonday sun. Verse number 7, be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for him to act. Don't worry about evil people who prosper or fret about their wicked schemes. Stop being angry. Turn from your rage. Don't lose your temper. It only leads to harm. For the wicked will be destroyed, but those who trust in the Lord will possess the land. Soon the wicked will disappear. Though you look for them, they will be gone. The lowly will possess the land and will live in peace and prosperity. The wicked plot against the ungodly. They snarl at them in defiance. But the Lord just laughs, for he sees their day of judgment coming. The wicked draw their swords and string their bows to kill the poor and the oppressed, to slaughter those who do right. Verse number 15, but their swords will stab their own hearts, and their bows will be broken. It is better to be godly and have little than to be evil and rich. For the strength of the wicked will be shattered, but the Lord takes care of the godly. Day by day the Lord takes care of the innocent, and they will receive an inheritance that lasts forever. They will not be disgraced in hard times. Even in famine, they will have more than enough. Now we're going to skip to the end of the chapter and see how the psalm ends. Verse number 39 says this, the Lord rescues the godly. He is their fortress in times of trouble. The Lord helps them, rescuing them from the wicked. Notice this, he saves them, and they find shelter in him. Let me tell you something. When you find shelter from the storms of life, when you find shelter in the Lord, that's some place where you can rest. When on the outside, everything seems like it's in chaos, and you can find inward shelter in the Lord, that is a place where you can rest. So again, first on our outline is the problem. When it comes to stress, what are some of the problems? Well, A in your outline is simply this. Sometimes the problem are the people in one's life. Oftentimes why we stress is because of people in our life. And I believe there's usually 3 areas that stress can stem from when it comes to people in our life. Both your friends and your enemies. People in your life. People that you have relationship with. Sometimes we often stress about their prosperity. Looking at someone else who I don't think is as good as me, who seems to have more than me, and seems to be getting it a lot easier than me. And I look at that individual and they begin to stress me out. It might not be that I don't like this individual. It's just like, oh my word, I'm stressing because it seems like they live on Easy Street and I live on Trouble Avenue. Why is that? You can maybe at times look at the world and see how they're flat out just living wicked lives, and you look at them and you see them prospering even in the midst of their sin. And at times that can cause us to stress. You can look at someone who you're commanded by Scripture to love. You're commanded to love them, but you really don't like them. And you look at that individual, and it seems like they're always one-upping you. You go out there, and you've worked hard to buy that new-to-you car, and you pull that in your driveway, and you're proud of all that work that went into that new-to-you car, and you look across the street, and they just pulled in with a brand-new BMW, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, that's working me up, that's stressing me out. You remodel a room in your house, and you look across the street, and they just built a brand new house. Or you go to Walmart, and you buy this inflatable pool, and you put it in your backyard, and you're thinking, oh, this is great. And then you look across there, and they just built a brand new water park in their backyard. And everything they do, it just seemingly stresses you out because they have this prosperity. They have something that I don't have. And oftentimes, we will stress over that. Sometimes it's because of their actions. The things that they do. And again, this can be the world acting like the world. you turn on the news and it just stresses you out, seeing how this world is acting, the things that they're doing. But sometimes it's not even the world acting like the world. Sometimes it can be the actions of those we love. Sometimes it's a spouse that you're still crazy about, you still love, but you're just not clicking like you once were. And deep down, you know it's all their fault. Amen. I mean, if they just would do things differently, if they were just more like me, things would be better. Amen. Had a couple, amen, some brave souls in here. Others who are like, I'm not falling into that trap. We're working on things right now. We're going to come on the victory side of this. Sometimes it's a son or a daughter that's not living for the Lord. You still love them, but their actions and they're stressing you out. A coworker that's more than you can handle. Do any of you have those coworkers that are just more than you? I see fingers getting pointed. This is getting bad. Let's switch subjects. Let's talk about the grace of God this morning. No, it could be that boss that's just overbearing. That one that's just like, they're just always looking over top of you, micromanaging your every move, and you think they're just stressing me. The presence of them stressing me out. Sometimes it could be that pastor that preaches way too long on Sunday mornings. You get to looking at your watch, and you're thinking, it's 11:45. Pastor, you are stressing me out right now. Sometimes it's others' actions. So the stress can come from people, these people problems, their prosperity, their actions, and sometimes their outcome. And sometimes it's not even the outcome that they've already lived out, but it's the stress of the outcome that's yet to come. And on this, hands down, when it comes to the outcome, the most stress a believer can feel is the stress of knowing the outcome of those who are outside of Christ. And that can stress you out when you get to thinking about that. That there's going to be judgment day someday. That the wrath of God's going to be poured out someday. And there's somebody who's outside of Christ, and I don't want that for them. And we can think about that, and it can tear us up inside, and it can stress us out, and we feel that strain, and we feel that tension. But even in the midst of that, you have the opportunity to stress or to rest. Because of Jesus' beautiful promise. Are any of you internally stressing out? Then come to me, and I'll give you rest. So it can be people in one's life that's the problem. Sometimes it's not people, sometimes it's simply the problem in one's life. And again, this can do with the evil that's around us. And oftentimes when we begin to stress because of the evils around us, we'll do one of two things when it comes to the evil in this world. Both of these actions resulting in even more stress. Either we'll begin to ignore the reality of evil. And if we do that, we'll soon embrace an evil lifestyle, a worldly lifestyle. And in turn, that causes even more stress inside of us. Or the other thing that we'll do is we'll not ignore the reality of evil, but we'll ignore the reality that it's God's place to be able to judge, that we leave that to God, and in turn we embrace a role that isn't ours of judge, jury, and executioner, and we begin to stress out thinking that, oh my goodness, I've got to do something about that evil world out there, and it just, man, I want to be the one that enacts that judgment, and I want to be the one that, that finger in the face, and it causes stress inside of us. When we think it's about us, and either I need to ignore the reality of evil or I need to ignore the reality of God's judgment, and that can lead to stress. And sometimes it's the situations that surround us. Not necessarily evil situations, just the situations that surround us. A job that seems like it's more than you can bear. Or a busy season in your life that it's just, I just don't have enough time for this, and I'm so tired and I'm getting stressed out. It could be a car that just keeps breaking down. You get it fixed and something else breaks down. You get it fixed and something else breaks down. It's stressing you out. A bill coming due that you don't have the money for. And you're stressing out about those situations that are around you. And oftentimes we forget that we are all in a spiritual war that will affect us mentally and emotionally in addition to spiritually. We are in this spiritual war There has been war waged on your soul. And an adversary who says, I want to introduce stress. Because if I can introduce stress, I can magnify that stress. I can do a work even in that stress. And if I can just weasel my way in there, I will eventually get that person stressed out. Stressed out to where you check out. And you got a Savior over here that's saying, I don't want you stressed. I don't want you stressed. I want you to find rest in me. David found himself in those situations more times than not, where he experienced that warfare. Sometimes he handled it right, and you can read that throughout the Psalms, and sometimes he didn't handle it so well, and you can read that throughout the Psalms. That's why I believe David was reminding himself as he was writing Psalm 37 of the things that he knew to be true, the revelation that God had shared with him. But I also believe he was doing us a favor by giving us great advice. This is the divine word of God that we've been reading. This is Jesus who wants to take that, since all scriptures point to him, and teach us some things. It also, C, not only A, that it can be the people in one's life, B, it can be the problems in one's life that causes you to stress out, but I also want you to know this. Stress produces things. Even though it's not a tangible thing that you can package up and you can send or you can buy, it is something internally that can be felt, and it will produce certain things in one's life. Oftentimes, things that we don't want in our life, but stress has caused some of that. There's a researcher, an author, Keith Wennert. He wrote the book, Stress, Unstress. And the things that you see listed here, according to his research, is what he had revealed, and he had revealed in his book. And he says that these are the products of stress. As he was researching and studying people who were stressed out compared to those who were unstressed, he saw these 10 characteristics overwhelmingly time and time again. Number one, he says that when somebody is dealing with stress and they're getting stressed out, they'll have difficulty making decisions. And sometimes the most simplest of decisions. If you've got stress in here, man, it's hard to even be able to make a decision of what am I going to have for breakfast this morning. You stress out over that when you think to yourself, man, there used to be a time where I knew what I was hungry for. So I go to the pantry and I grab it, but now I can't even make that decision. He said oftentimes it's stress. Excessive daydreaming or fantasizing about getting away from it all. Have you been there before? Where you've got stuff that's going on and all you can think about is, man, I just need to get out. I just need to get out. I just need to get away from it all. So that's a characteristic of stress. That's something stress produces. Increased use of substances like cigarettes, alcohol, uppers, downers. When you're stressed, it's like, man, I just can't get enough of those things. I just need more and more and more of those things. He said oftentimes that trails back to the idea of just stress. And when you get stressed out, it's a matter of more and more and more. Your thoughts trail off while speaking or writing. We had that before. You're talking to somebody and all of a sudden it's just like... Some of you think, my goodness, Pastor Matt must be always stressed out because he's like rabbit trail after rabbit trail. Sometimes, but oftentimes it's not. It's just who I am. Excessive worrying about all things. Notice all things. There are some things in life that, I worry about because it's a big deal. And I know I shouldn't, but I struggle with that. But when I'm stressed out, it seems like I worry about everything. Will my car start for me this morning? Well, chances are it's going to. Why am I worrying about that? Is it going to be busy on the interstate this morning? Is it going to be... Why are we worrying about those things? Oftentimes it's because we're stressed and we worry about all things at that time. Sudden outbursts of temper and hostility. Where you're like a time bomb just waiting to go off. I used to be able to stub my toe and oh my goodness, that hurt. I stubbed my toe. But then there's those times where I stub my toe and oh my word, boom! It's just like, ah! Everybody's like, get away from him. He's scaring me today. You might be stressed out. Paranoid ideas and mistrust of friends and family. Forgetfulness for appointments, deadlines, and dates. Frequent feelings of inadequacy. Oftentimes that's stress. Can I do this? Am I good enough? And I just don't know. It's just for somebody else. Oftentimes you're stressed about things. And reversals in usual behavior. So for those of you who are married and you see this switch in behavior in a spouse, sometimes it could be that spouse is just stressed about something. Sometimes the best thing that you can do is just say, let's talk. Let's unstress. Let's work through this thing. And listen to me this morning, stress will affect you in a major way, and it will produce things in your life. And it will affect those around you also in a major way, because all of those things that are produced because of stress never make life easier for you or for those who are around you. So let's handle stress by kicking stress to the curb and embracing the rest that God has for us. And I believe that all these stresses that we've talked about, again, can be eliminated, they can be replaced if we apply. The second thing on your outline is the prescription. By prescription, I simply mean a recommendation that is authoritatively put forward. That's the definition of prescription we're using here. It is a recommendation by God through David given to us so that we can apply. Recommendation meaning God isn't going to force you to do this. None of the things we talk about He's going to force you to do, but at the same time He is putting it in His Word because it is beneficial, and He knows it will work if you follow the recommendation. Common quote that the world uses when it comes to stress. Shake your head one way or another if you've ever heard this before. Don't stress. Do your best. Forget the rest. Have you guys ever been told that before and you're stressing about something? Don't stress. Do your best and forget the rest. Now, that's good advice to a certain degree. But unfortunately, even that advice that the world puts forward to us is missing out on the most important ingredient when it comes to resting instead of stressing, and that's the ingredient of God. Sometimes you can say, okay, I'm choosing not to stress. I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to try to forget the rest. And that might work for 5 minutes. And you find yourself stressing again because you're trying to do it on your own. Let me tell you, I'm encouraging you in the next 2 weeks to introduce your situations, your struggle, your stresses to God and allow Him to have a say in your matters of life. From Psalm 37, we're going to discover an 8-step prescription that'll help us rest instead of stress. Within each one of these verses and each one of these points, I want to bring special focus to 2 key words. Looking back again at Psalm 37, verse number 1. This prescription put forward of finding rest instead of stress. Verse 1, don't worry. Everyone say, don't worry. Don't worry about the wicked or envy those who do wrong, for like grass, they'll soon fade away. Like spring flowers, they will soon wither. A on your outline is simply don't worry. 2 words there, so the emphasis is on both of them. Don't worry. It's interesting if you look in the Hebrew, for the word that's used for worry here, the word is kara, which means this: to be angry, to burn inside, to be displeased with something, to fret, to grieve, or to wax hot. Let me tell you something that sounds a lot like stress. Don't stress. Don't kara. Don't kara. Remind yourself of that. Look in the mirror sometime when you're stressing or you're worrying about something. Just remember, don't kara. Don't kara. You find somebody stressing, I was looking and say, don't kara. They'll say, what in the world does that mean? And just get their mind off of things like the desserts and stress thing. Worked for me. Don't kara. Don't stress. Beginning in verse number 3, we're gonna see some conditional promises. So the first point, don't worry. Don't stress. So that's the world saying is just don't do that. We're building on that right now. But verse number 3, I need to bring this to your attention that we're going to look at some conditional promises. In Scripture, you'll find 2 types of promises. You'll find unconditional promises. Thank God for those. And you'll also find conditional promises. Unconditional promises that God loves everyone. For God so loved the world. Unconditional promise. Unconditional promises. His mercies are new every morning. How many of you are grateful for that unconditional promise? How many of you are grateful for the fact that where sin abounds, grace does that much more abound? That's an unconditional promise. That's true. You take that to the bank. But also throughout Scripture, there are conditional promises. The unconditional, there's no requirements to be met. There's nothing else. Conditional, there's a condition based upon that promise. Meaning that you will never see the fulfillment of that promise until you meet the condition of that promise. That's so important to know when you read Scripture and you see a conditional promise. You'll never see the fulfillment of the promise until you meet the condition of the promise. I don't need to give you any examples of that because we're going to find some here beginning in verse number 3. Check this out. After we don't worry, after we don't kara, don't look at your neighbor real quick and say, don't kara. Don't kara. After we do that, after we're no longer worrying about things, we're not stressing, we're choosing in our minds to do that. He goes on and he says this in verse number 3, trust in the Lord and do good. Now notice this fulfillment of the promise. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper. We know God is spirit. We know that we live in this body, but inside of us we have this spirit. God being a spirit, this is primarily, it's a spiritual promise about this land, and prospering on the inside. Trust in the Lord. Acronym for trust, total reliance, undeniable surety together. Have you guys remember that? I've shared that oftentimes with you. Trust, total reliance, undeniable surety together. Trust in the Lord and do good. Trust, keyword trust in the Lord and do good. Now, why do I emphasize the and there? Thank you for asking. It's because the and does a very important job of connecting the two commands. Here we are called to trust in the Lord, but he also says, and do good. So do you realize that according to this conditional promise here, if we're going to live safely in the land, if we're going to prosper in the inside, if we're going to find that rest instead of the stress, we cannot just sit there convincing ourselves that we're trusting in the Lord. My total reliance is on you. I'm going to find that undeniable surety, and I'm going to wrap it all together, and I'm going to trust in you and not do anything. At that point, you will not find the fulfillment of this promise. Trust in the Lord and do good. Then you will live safely in the land of prosper. If you want the then of the verse, you must do the trusting and the doing. So you can't say idly by. You have to be doing good. Verse number 4, it goes on and it says this, take delight in the Lord and he will give you your heart's desire. Some of you might have memorized that verse as delight in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Awesome promise. But yet how many times is our heart's desire that I'm not stressed? I ask you, how many of you guys want to be stressed or how many of you guys want to find rest? Everybody's like, I want rest. Nobody wants to be stressed. Your heart's desire is that I'm not going to be stressed out in life. I don't want to feel those effects. Well, we can look at that and say, God, give me my heart's desire. God, give me my heart's desire. But the conditional promise is this. Take delight in the Lord. Delight in the Lord. The two key words are in and Lord. You'll never find your heart's desire if you're only delighting in your heart's desire. And how many times is that so easy to do? Delighting in the fact of, I want this, and I want the joy, I want the peace, I want the contentment, I want the satisfaction, I want the rest, and we're delighting in that instead of delighting in the Lord. Here's what's going to happen. When you're only delighting in your heart's desire, you're going to find yourself drifting farther and farther away from the very one you should be delighting in. Because you're not going to find the fulfillment of this promise when we're only delighting in our heart's desire. Delight in the Lord. And he will give you your heart's desire. You could say, take delight in the Lord and he will eliminate the stress, if truly your heart's desire is that you're not stressed. So delight in the Lord. Now remember these steps. So as you're delighting in the Lord, these are steps. We don't worry. We trust in the Lord and do good. We delight in the Lord. And as you're delighting in the Lord, He may ask you to do some good things along the way, so no spiritual laziness here. Verse number 5 says this, commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust Him, and He will help you. D on your outline. 2 key words. Commit everything. Commit how much? Everything. Commit how much? Everything you do to the Lord. Easier said than done. There's some things in this life that's easy to commit. There's some things that are a little harder to commit. Conditional promise. Commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust Him. We already talked about that. Total reliance on Him, not surety to the other. We're trusting Him, and He will help you. Commit everything. When's the last time you committed that relationship with your stressful boss or your stressful coworker? Where you've committed that to Him. God, I can't keep that internal anymore. I got to give that to you. I can't handle that because as long as I've got that inside of me and I'm trying to figure it all out, I'm trying to work it all out, I'm trying to do all that kind of stuff, it's just causing me stress and added stress and more stress and magnified stress and it's stressing me out. Commit everything to the Lord, or that stressful coworker, or that stressful employee, or that stressful child. Those of you who have children, you've probably had that stressful child that just stressing me out. When's the last time that you've committed even that stressful child to the Lord and said, I can't stress over this anymore. I'm committing this to you and I'm trusting you. Committing meaning that like it's yours. It's yours. When's the last time you committed that relationship with your spouse to the Lord? And I'm committing this to you, God. You work this thing. You do, God. I'm committing this to you. I'm trusting you, and I'm willing to do good. Whatever you tell me to do, I'm willing to do that, but I'm committing it to you. I'm no longer internalizing this, but I'm casting all of my cares on you. And let me tell you, I care about this individual. And this has become a care or a concern inside of me, so I'm casting that upon you. When's the last time you committed that stressful preacher who preaches way too long on a Sunday morning to the Lord? That way you're not leaving here being like, oh my goodness, once again it's noon and we're just not getting out here. Commit that to the Lord and you'll leave here with a smile on your face. Commit that to Him. How about stress in general? God, I'm just committing everything to you. When you commit it, you're trusting Him for it. And again, this conditional promise says He will help you. You know, God always desires to help you. The things in your life that you can't handle on your own, it's God's desire to help you. And He wants to do that. But there's conditions. He's a gentleman who will never force Himself or His help upon you, but He's always there, ready to do the heavy lifting. How many times so do we miss out on the help because we lack the trust? And oftentimes we lack the trust because we're not willing to commit everything. Verse number 7 says this, be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for Him to act. Again, that word, don't worry. David's reminding yourself, don't stress out about things. Don't worry about things. We've already said we're committing all of it to Him anyways. Don't worry about the evil people who prosper or fret about their wicked schemes. Be still. You could also read that in your translation. It could say, rest in the presence of the Lord. So E on your outline. 2 key words are rest and presence. You rest in the presence of the Lord. Now, if you're sitting here this morning and you're looking for that one verse that could possibly, in some way, justify spiritual apathy or spiritual laziness. You might be thinking you found that. Just be still and just rest. Just rest. Just kick my feet up spiritually and just rest. Life's stressing me out. So I'm just going to sit here and wait for God to work it all out. Well, let me just inform you that you haven't found that verse, because to sit there and to do nothing is to ignore the fact that we are called to trust and do in order to have safety and to find spiritual prosperity. So know this, that rest isn't a break from God. Rest isn't a break from church. Rest isn't a break from evangelism. It isn't a break from ministry outreach. It isn't a rest from being able to fulfill or being called to fulfill the Great Commission. Oftentimes that's what we will do, and the enemy's very good at tricking us into that. Knowing that we are called to trust and to do. Knowing God's given us commands and He's given us these conditional promises. That He will help us, but we have to be willing to do our end. We do the light lifting, He'll do the heavy lifting, and together it's going to make something beautiful. And the enemy's saying, okay, listen, just take some time off. Just take some time off. That's all you have. You need to rest in the presence of God. Remember, the devil never comes to you with a full-blown lie. Sometimes he'll come to you with 95% truth and 5% deception, which in turn makes it a lie. It's deceiving. And that's what he'll oftentimes do. Sometimes he'll try to distract you from the truth with something that looks a lot like the truth. Sometimes he'll magnify one verse in the Bible that you're looking for. And it's like, there it is. And you throw out the rest of the Bible, and that contradicts the very way that you're interpreting, or that he's interpreting that for you, that your flesh is interpreting that for you. And we throw the rest of it out, and we grab a hold of that, and we say, that's what I'm looking for, because I'm looking for a break. I'm looking to be able to take some steps back. I'm looking for that opportunity to justify why I'm going to distance myself from God, and distance myself from the church, and distance myself from fulfilling the Great Commission, and distance myself from ministry and outreach, distance myself from the very reasons that I'm still here on this earth. And let me tell you something. When that takes place, and we probably all have people that we can think of that fit in that category. Maybe even you yourself can fit in that category. Maybe there's been a time in your life where you fit in that category. And you will find that what happens is somebody who is just a little off becomes somebody who becomes a little distant, who becomes somebody who at some point is fully miserable on the inside. And it's because they've bought into this idea that all you simply do is just take a break from God, take a break from church, take a break from all the things that we're called to do. Rest isn't a break from those things, but here's what it is. Rest is about making time to be still in His presence. And being still has more to do with mentally and emotionally, and especially spiritually being still, than it does with physical inactivity when it comes to doing good. Trust me, there's a definite time and place for being still in the presence of the Lord, even when you're busy doing that which is good. Because sometimes, again, the traps that we can fall into, you can become so busy doing things for God that you're ignoring the time that you should be spending with God. Even when you're busy doing things for God, you're doing that with God. So you can even rest and be still in His presence, even when you're doing good, even when you're continuing to be faithful to these conditional commands and promises. Psalm 46:10 tells us this. It says, "Be still and know that I am God." Y'all heard that verse before, haven't you? Be still and know that I am God. In other words, again, because we've already established this has nothing to do with physical inactivity, has nothing to do with a break from God, a break from church, a break from ministry, a break from outreach, a break from evangelism. But while you're doing all of those things, Be still and rest in his presence, because at that time your eyes can be opened to the amazing things that he is doing around you and in you, even in the here and now, and undeniably you will know that he is God, because spiritually you'll be seeing things that you aren't seeing when your mind and when your emotions and internally you're becoming stressed out about things and your eyes are closed. Your spiritual eyes are closed. Your physical eyes still open, saying, I need a break. I need a rest. I need to take like 55 steps backwards on this thing because I'm stressing out. Sometimes we need to close those physical eyes and say, I'm being still. Mind, slow down. Emotion, slow down, man. This isn't the end. We serve a God of hope. We serve a God of promise. We serve a God who tells us that the best is truly yet to come. Slow down. Spiritual eyes are opened. He's God. And he's got this. Be still and know that I am God. The prophet Elijah received word that Jezebel was out to kill him. If you found out that the president or a high-ranking officer or the president's wife, or if you found out, it came across the news, they're after you, would that stress you out? This person's got the power to kill me. And here's what Elijah finds out about this. And he runs out into the wilderness. And remember, a wilderness, a physical wilderness, can give us a spiritual picture. He ran out into the wilderness. Outside, he's in the wilderness. Inside, it's a wilderness. And he continues running until he stumbles in exhaustion. He's thinking to himself, I've just got to get away. And he stumbles in exhaustion, and God sends an angel to tend to Elijah's needs. He gives him food, he gives him water. Elijah's strengthened. And upon being strengthened, God tells him to go to a cave in Horeb. There in the cave, Elijah begins to complain to God about the struggles of life and how Jezebel has killed every prophet except for me, and now she's after me. God, this is the stuff that's going on. All of this stuff, all of this chaos. My eyes are on all of these things that's going wrong. And then the Lord tells him, get out of this cave that you're in and go to the mountain. You are in a cave here right now, and all you're thinking about is all this dark stuff, and it's part of this journey because the Lord sent him to that cave. So in this darkness, the Lord's saying, okay, now listen, go to the mountain. Get out of that cave. Your eyes are only on the darkness of this cave and the darkness of your surroundings, the darkness of your situations, the darkness of your internal struggles. Get out of the cave and go to the mountain because God has something that he's wanting to tell you. So Elijah, being the man of God he is, goes. And he goes to the mountain. And he stands in the presence of God so he could hear from him. Then the Lord sent a mighty wind which broke the rocks in pieces. Visualize this with me. Here's Elijah on a mountain ready to hear from God, and all of a sudden this loud wind comes and is breaking these rocks. Sends an earthquake. Visualize that. Strong wind, earthquake. He sends a fire, but his voice was in none of those things. I believe there's beautiful truth found within this story. So, Elijah, when you are focused in the cave on all the stuff that's going on around you and in you, you're running scared, you're exhausted. Get out of the cave and get to the mountain. He gets to the mountain. And all of a sudden, loud stuff all around him. And the Lord's voice wasn't in any of those things, any of that loud stuff. In none of those things, signifying that you oftentimes won't hear from God in the loud commotions of life. When there's stuff going on, and that's what's catching our physical ears, oftentimes our spiritual ears aren't hearing from God. But I also believe that there's a truth found in there that God's not limited to speaking in these loud manifestations or these big manifestations. God was doing all that. Visualize that with me. You talk about something supernatural. This strong wind and rocks are just breaking to pieces. this earthquake that God sent, and here comes this fire. God's voice was in none of those things. 1 Kings 19, 12, and 13. And after the earthquake there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire there was the sound of a gentle whisper. That sound of a gentle whisper. Can you hear the gentle whisper when your mind's going a million miles an hour in a million different directions? Emotionally, you're just... No. That's why we're called internally, commit everything to the Lord. Because internally, I can't hear a thing because I'm stressed out. Get out of the cave and get to the mountain. And when the adversary tries to deceive you into thinking, man, you've got to have this loud, just display from God. That's how you're going to hear from. No. He's going to speak to you in that still, small voice. So even when things are going on in this world that can oftentimes distract us, we're out of the cave and we're on the mountain. We're standing in the presence of God. You're not going to hear from him in all of that noise. But he will give you that gentle whisper. David understood that. And that's why in this progression, he's already saying, don't worry, commit everything to him, trust in him, do all of these things, be doing good, and then be still. While you're doing all that, now be still. So you can hear the gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. And a voice said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The still small voice of God that can be heard best in the moments when we are still. That still small voice of God that can be heard best in the moments we are still. Each and every day, make time to be still. I'm going to ask Kevin to play a video here real quick that hopefully will help exemplify this point of the necessity of being still in his presence.
To boost its interest rates up to 18% as it battles against financial collapse. The move is designed to stabilize the
And now, economic messages to win the support of undecided voters.
David continues on in verse number 8, Psalm 37. Building these steps for us to find rest instead of stress. He says this, stop being angry. Turn from your rage. Don't lose your temper. It only leads to harm. F on your outline. Stop being angry. If you're doing all of these things, but you're not kicking anger to the curb, you will still be stressed out. Stop being angry. Back in the day, coaching basketball, I probably shouldn't even share the story because I'll find myself getting angry, and Kirk was there too. He'll find himself getting angry. We were coaching basketball, and we were playing against the team. We're tied for being the top in our conference. We're playing them. We're thinking to ourselves, this is going to be a good showdown. And let me tell you something. It didn't turn into a good showdown. They cleaned our clocks. I didn't much care for this opposing coach. I was commanded to love him, but he was one of those that was really hard to like. And I just wanted to be him. He had this one player, we called him the Golden Boy, because everything revolved around this player, and I didn't want the Golden Boy to beat us on our home court, and he beat us good. Yes, he did. He beat us real good. After the game, man, I was upset, said things I shouldn't say to the players. I was mad. I got to the point where I became physically sick. Next 2 days, I was physically sick. I couldn't let go of this thing. Anger was burning me up on the inside. It got worse and worse and worse. Man, I didn't want to go to practices. I didn't want to go to the games. I was done with it because of that one game, losing to that one team. And I found out the angrier I got, the more stressed out I got. And worry and stress will also, it's not just going to be an internal thing. Eventually, it's going to start coming out. And let me tell you, it started coming out. Turned into a very ugly person for the next few days. It came to the point where I had to just, okay, I'm past it. I'm committing it to you. And it was amazing how once I did that, the next week, things started getting just a little bit better. Still at times when I would think about that game, I'd find myself getting angry again, just like I am right now. Lord, help me. How many years ago, and it's still bothering me. I've got to commit everything to the Lord. Everybody tells me, Matt, commit it to the Lord. That way I don't get angry about this anymore. But I find that this passage is so true. Anger, anger, anger. Ephesians 4 verse 26 says this, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, for, this is key, anger gives a foothold to the devil. That devil that wants to stress you out. If he can keep you angry, he's got that foothold. If you have an anger problem, I guarantee you have a stress problem. The devil loves to get in every situation in life and wreak havoc and stress you out. Verse number 27, continuing on our steps, verse 27, turn from evil and do good. David's reminding us, be willing to do something. Don't sit idly by, do good, and you will live in the land forever, for the Lord loves justice. And he will never abandon the godly. He will keep them safe forever, but the children of the wicked will die. G, turn from evil and do good. So again, the beauty of the promise, you will live in the land forever. This has to do with the land of promise, being in a place where God's promises are being fulfilled, where he keep you safe forever. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Conditional promise if we turn from evil and do good. So it's more than just steering clear of the world, striving to live a holy lifestyle, being safe in our confines of our church building, thinking, well, until the rapture, until God takes me home, as long as I stay as far away from that as I can, everything's good. No, it's the and do good. So once again, it's doing good. As we close, the comfort and the challenge comes from verse number 34. When it comes to the stress or the rest, last thing, put your hope in the Lord. Travel steadily along his path. He will honor you by giving you the land. You will see the wicked destroyed. H on your outline. Put your hope. Everyone say hope. Put your hope. Acronym for hope. Let me remind you of this if you've forgotten it. Having only positive expectations, because let me tell you something, we have a good God, don't we? That's got your best in mind. So having only positive expectations, even though it might not be like we want it to be, his ways are above our ways, his thoughts are above our thoughts, but it's still going to be good. Put your hope in the Lord and travel steadily along his path. The comfort is that he will honor you by giving you the land, that land of rest, that spiritual rest. Stress-free land sounds pretty amazing. Sounds pretty comforting. But that's just a reflection of how good God is. That he prepares those things for us and says, here, you can have that conditionally. If you're willing to do these things we've been talking about, and then put your hope in the Lord. At the same time, we all must know that we might not reach that destination overnight. How easy would that be, man? That sounds great. But going from stress-filled to stress-free, going from stressed to rest, that might not happen overnight. It might be a journey. Travel steadily. Did you notice that? Travel steadily. Put one foot in front of the other. Children of Israel, you didn't walk from bondage one step into the promised land. There was a journey that had taken place. Sometimes we make that journey last a lot longer than it should. But if we just travel steadily along the path, you will get to the destination. So the challenge is simply hope in the Lord and travel steadily to get there. Implement the truths we talked about daily. You'll have less stress and more rest.